Hi, everyone. This is Sarah McElroy from Raise to Rise. I'm so excited to be here with you today for our very first recorded interview with the incredible Cheryl Pia. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's very exciting. I love what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. Very excited to have you. Cheryl is passionate about building a better world here and now, driving lasting societal change through thought-provoking content, expert storytelling, and philanthropic engagement. Cheryl was the CEO of the Pia Agency for 22 years, which she founded with her husband, Cliff. It was a multi-million-dollar creative agency based out of San Diego. And then in 2017, their agency was acquired by Creative Drive, which was also then eventually acquired by Accenture Interactive. Cheryl became president of the Sound and Motion division at Creative Drive, a role which she held until she and Cliff departed the agency in November 2021. So again, Cheryl, so excited to have you. I can't think of a more perfect person for our very first recorded interview, given the similarities in our stories and how we both started to share a bit more openly about our experiences on LinkedIn and really found an incredible appetite for this type of conversation and engagement. And then, of course, meeting very serendipitously in Lisbon, Portugal, of all places, last November, right after you and Cliff made your leap. So thank you again.
Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, so would love to start there and get a little bit more of your story, if that works for you. So our paths crossed in Lisbon when I was there on a solo trip for a week, and we booked an Airbnb experience dinner. And it just so turned out that Cheryl and her husband were there as well. So if we could start there and work backwards on your story, that would be amazing.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, Sarah, we did meet in Lisbon on our night number one and met at a fairly random photo event, but got to talking about leaving careers, changing careers, having the courage to leave a position, and connected on that. And Sarah was sort of at the beginning of her journey, as were we. We had left our position 4 days prior. So it was all very fresh, very new. We were extremely enthusiastic, though, as I recall. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think I didn't realize that it was so shortly thereafter, and you all were still untethering all of the last entanglements, but also making sense of what's next and what was to come. So that's really cool. Can you talk a little bit about how you and Cliff both shared your stories on LinkedIn and what the response was?
Yeah. So when we decided to announce that we were leaving publicly, I had given notice 4 months prior, so I knew I was leaving. But
Okay.
when we decided to share our stories publicly, Cliff is my husband and business partner, as Sarah said. We each wrote a post and just talking about how grateful we were for everything that we had experienced up until that time, and kind of sharing our excitement and maybe a little bit of our fears about what we were going into. We didn't and still don't know what's next, but we knew that there was something else out for us. And the response was incredible. I mean, we had between us, I think we had around 40,000 views and a
Wow.
lot of response publicly. But the thing that was really, I guess, surprising, not surprising, was that so many people reached out to us privately and said, I am absolutely in the same place or want to be in the same place. I want to hear about how you guys do this. Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like for you guys to go through this? And of course, we want to hear what's next. What are you going to do next? Are you going to start another business? Like, what does it all look like? But in the post, we talked about taking time off and going to Europe for a while.
Okay.
And again, the response to that was also overwhelming. I mean, people were really like, I want that. I really
Right.
want that. Yeah. So it made us start to think, it just made us start to think that maybe documenting it would be wise, even if just for ourselves.
Totally. It's so true. And I think I had that same experience too, where sharing my post, I had about 28,000 people who viewed that. And same sort of thing. It was, yes, it was amazing to see that sort of traction publicly, but more importantly, and more heart driven really were those private messages and people reaching out in the same sort of thing. People are experiencing this as a collective more broadly than I think anybody thought. And so I'm so glad we're here and we're having this conversation and you all are documenting your journey for the future. Now,
Yeah.
before we get into that and the exciting projects that you have to come, would love to learn a little bit more about selling your agency, going to Creative Drive, then the acquisition by Accenture, and how that sort of arc of your journey eventually led you and Cliff to leave in 2021.
Yeah. So we had, as you mentioned, we had been building the business for 22 years, and our company was entirely culture driven. I mean, everything was built around it. It was, everyone talks about people first, and it sounds cliche, but we really, really were people
Yeah,
first. And that was when we decided to sell the business. We really believed that the company that was acquiring us shared the same values.
okay.
And they were really clear that that was one of the big reasons they were acquiring us, because they wanted us to kind of bring that and spread that throughout their other companies. And it turns out that even though that may have been their intention, they really had no ability to kind of incorporate that, and in
I
fact
see.
really didn't operate from a people first perspective for sure.
Sure.
And so there was tension from the beginning. It was very difficult for my team to operate within that. It was extremely difficult for me because I was responsible for that. I was going to say I consider myself
Sure.
responsible, but I was 100% responsible for making that decision, and felt that I needed to be the buffer between that
I see.
management team, that leadership team, and my team. So it was constantly stressful. And from a business perspective, not a good fit. They didn't know what to do with us. So again, very, very stressful. And then in August of 2020, that company was sold to Accenture Interactive. And I was very excited
Okay.
about that because they're the biggest holding company in the world, and they have a phenomenal reputation. And I was fortunate to meet the leadership pretty soon thereafter, the CEO and president, and who were both absolutely stellar humans and really were very culture conscious, but it's just a massive machine.
Right.
And we were a little nothing in that massive machine. So while they kind of left us alone, I was still reporting to the same leadership team that
Okay.
was not simpatico with. And I decided at that time that it was time for me to leave. I was contractually free to go.
Okay.
And then we were in the middle of COVID, and I just didn't feel that I could leave my team. I felt like I was
Uh,
abandoning them. And so I had a real responsibility, a sense of responsibility to stay and support them through the integration with Accenture. I didn't really want to lose
sure.
them to that and help them navigate that. And so we ended up staying quite a lot longer than we wanted to.
Okay. I see. I totally understand. It's a really fine balance between the nobility of loyalty to the people that you love at an organization, and also then determining, okay, is this the best for me? Am I able to still show up as my best self to take care of them when I'm having to do such shielding? Adam Grant had a great post a couple weeks ago about that, exactly that, and trying to change culture from the bottom up. And oftentimes you just end up in their shielding, and it's more like a survival sort of a situation than a real creative, innovative, thriving culture that you're able to preserve. So I totally understand.
Yeah, I think that sums it up beautifully. Honestly, that was what it felt like. It felt like a
Mhm.
survival situation. And the contrast from how I used to feel about my job, where I was really passionate about it, really excited
Yeah.
about it. I loved coming to work. I always loved the people I worked with. I worked with some just remarkably talented people, and I had some fantastic clients. So I
Sure.
was always enthusiastic. And then after the acquisition, it became survival. And
Totally.
that's not sustainable for anybody. And it was untenable ultimately.
I completely understand. So, to that end, I've been having some really powerful conversations, not only with women who've resigned, but also to your point of people reaching out privately, a number of women who want to leave, but just feel like they can't. So, kind of helping people to understand what that process was like for you as you're going from, okay, I'm in survival mode. I'm going to have to make a change. What did it take really to get you to that point of making that decision? Was it a real kind of like gradual build? Did you have that internal knowing? Walk us through a little bit about how that felt for you.
Well, it was definitely a gradual build.
Okay.
And I had a lot of fear around leaving. I think financially,
Mm.
emotionally, ego wise, I had a lot
Yeah,
riding on my title and the clients I worked with.
sure.
And so there was a lot of fear around that. The thing that kind of pushed me over the edge, though, was I'm part of a mastermind group with Summit. Summit has this, one of the offerings of Summit is Summit Junto, which is I highly recommend, but it's small groups of people who are curated by Summit based on background and experience.
Okay.
And it's people with all varying degrees, of experience, varying degrees, different kinds of backgrounds, but having similarities that they think are going to allow people to
Okay.
thrive. And I hit the jackpot with my group. I have the most nurturing, supportive, amazing group. And at
That's
our first
wonderful.
meeting, which was in October 2020, we were all talking about who we were, and I just unloaded. And I don't even know where it came from. It just came from the depths of my
Wow.
soul. And I just shared how really unhappy I was. And at the time, we don't necessarily give each other advice per se, but at the time, everyone was like, what the heck are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And each subsequent meeting, I would sort of justify why I was still doing it and why I was still there. And religiously, they would call me on it. And there were a couple of instances where I thought maybe we could make it work. As I said, we had built a relationship with the CEO and president of Accenture Interactive,
Sure.
and really we're actively working to try to find a place that maybe made sense where we can bring our skills, and not our skills, more than our skills, our values to bear.
Right. Right.
But ultimately it just wasn't going to work out. And as they continued to hold me accountable and encourage me to make a shift, the thing that ultimately got to me was, do you want the way you're living right now, do you want this to be what you model to your children? And I have 4 adult children, and the youngest is 21. And the answer to that was no. They
Yeah.
had seen me become progressively less happy and not making a change.
I
And,
see. Right.
if I was giving any of them career advice, I would have absolutely told them that it was time to leave and to find something else and to
For
really
sure.
live true to who they are. So that was the thing that tipped me over the edge. And so I gave notice.
It's a hard thing once you know and the blinders are off and you know you have a decision. It's like you can't go back, you can't unsee what you saw. You had this realization about what you're modeling for your kids. There's no going back from that. To that end, as you gave your notice, from that knowing to giving your notice, how much time was in between? And then I would ask, kind of, how did you plan? There are so many logistical considerations in leaving a role when it comes to even finances and health insurance and just all of that. So would love if you could share a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. I mean, I gave 4 months notice, and I did that. I did that for them. And I did that.
Okay.
I allowed myself some runway to do some planning on the financial side and some planning on the health insurance. The benefits side is
Right.
a nightmare to navigate. But mostly it was really for my team to make sure that they were positioned really well. And I wanted to do right by them. I wanted to do right by Accenture. I didn't want to
Sure.
leave anybody high and dry. I'm not sure anybody ultimately appreciated it. On my team, they did. On maybe,
Sure.
yeah, maybe not everybody appreciated it as much as I think they should have. But I was in a solid position because I had been working with someone to take my place I've been grooming it for the last couple of years.
Okay.
And so I just really doubled down on that and continued to work with him, up the frequency of that, really positioned us with clients so that they were unconsciously moving away from their
I
reliance and
see.
needing to talk to us. Initially, the one thing I didn't say either is I was going to be the only one to leave. Cliff was not going to leave.
Oh,
He was going
wow.
to
Okay.
stay. He was going to stay. And I think a couple months in, after I'd given notice, he started feeling like he was not going to be happy. And one, he wasn't going to be
I
happy without
see.
me because, but
Of course.
also, yeah, also, I think he was having the dawning recognition that there really wasn't a place for him in a gigantic organization like Accenture. So as a couple, we sat down and said, okay, look, if we're going to do this, let's just take this leap of faith and do it and jump into the void and not know what's next and be okay with that.
Wow, that is amazing. I had no idea that Cliff wasn't originally going to be leaving as well. But I'd imagine too, from taking my own leap as of late, that having that kind of team support and emotional support too probably has been really great and really bonding for the two of you all. Well, I remember when we spoke last time, you told me a story about how when you were finally in Portugal, you all realized that you had never really ever been present together on a vacation before. So maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah. That recognition happened day one, not of the trip. I mean, day
Oh,
one.
wow.
When
Okay.
I left, there had been such a long run up that I was ready. It was
Sure.
time, and it was emotional, but it was also really time and fine. So the next day, of course, we recorded an episode of our show because the next day was like,
Love it.
oh, holy, what the heck did we just do? But the thing that I noticed almost instantly was that I had this presence. I was able to do things with so much more intention and attention and being really and fully present. And it felt new and different. I
Okay.
wasn't used to operating that way. And then 4 days later, we left and went to Portugal. I think I met you on day 5, not 4. And almost immediately when we were there, we realized that we were fully engaged. We were totally connected to each other. And it felt amazing, but we didn't name it right away.
Okay. I
And
see.
then we started realizing that, in fact, having worked together, especially, we were always working. It didn't matter, even when we'd go on vacation with our kids and would unplug, we never really stopped. Even if we weren't sneaking and checking emails or taking phone calls, we were talking about it. And if we weren't talking about it, we were thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so we weren't really present. And this was the first trip where we really absolutely were. And it was earth shattering, to be honest with you.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it really was. And I have some sadness and guilt that was
Uh,
the first time I really felt that way, and some sadness that I've probably missed so much. But I also enjoying this part immensely, and it changed the way we approached the trip. Entirely we were just winging it, to be honest, and we would
okay.
go where we wanted to go and stay where we wanted to stay, and if we didn't like it, we'd leave. And we've also never traveled like that, because we always have it, there's always a hard stop, right?
Right.
And so that flexibility also kind of changed the way that we thought about travel and the way we thought about really even being with each other. I mean, it
Right.
reinforced how compatible we are because we were in the same place. I worried, honestly, that we wouldn't have anything to talk about because we'd
Mm,
spent so much of our time talking about work. And we have plenty to talk about.
yeah.
And I'm not going to lie and say that we didn't have conversations about, oh, what could have gone better, should have gone better, or reflecting on our years in the business. We definitely did, but we'd kind of catch ourselves and say, enough, let's just be here. And we're able to kind of bring ourselves back. So it's the biggest gift. And the one thing I want to say, Sarah, that I can feel people watching this, I can feel their eyes rolling a little bit, because I have to recognize that we're very fortunate in that we did sell our business, that we do
Of
have some
course. Sure.
financial cushion, right? And so it's a very different situation than a lot of other women might find themselves in. So I don't want to seem glib about, well, we made this decision and then we traveled through Europe and it was
Right.
fabulous. I don't want to be glib about that, because it's obviously different for everybody, but that sense of presence doesn't require having been in Portugal or
Right.
going away. It really is something to take note of in your day to day.